Loving this music, guys. Hello, everybody. It's Ryan here. It's your friendly physician. Hope you and your family are well. God bless you so much. And thank you for joining me in yet another mind map video in internal medicine. Last time we covered cardiovascular signs and symptoms. Today we're covering cardiovascular examination. Now, if you haven't yet subscribed to my channel, I hope that you will consider that. Let's dig in, guys. So as with mind maps, we progress from the 1 o'clock position and move clockwise. So you can see here, we're talking about inspection, palpation, and auscultation. Percussion, we don't usually use in cardiovascular examination, has limited usefulness. So we're just going to omit percussion from our approach, okay? Let's get in there. Alrighty. So, under inspection, what can we see? All right. So, when you inspect a patient cardiovascular, remember you got to get adequate exposure. So, they should be exposed from the torso. Um, and you look at the sternum for any obvious deformity. Is it pectus carinatum, pectus excavatum, any abnormal pulsation? So, if there's an aneurysm, there could be a ventricular or aortic pulsation. Usually, we call it an active precordium if you can see any visible pulsations in the precordium. Then look at the veins and look for any obvious collateralization of veins, which may happen with chronic liver disease, for one, spider angiomata. Um, Jugular venous pressure, okay, we discussed that before. Is the jugular venous pressure raised? Any abnormal waveforms that you can see, especially the giant CV waves of tricuspid regurgitation? All right, the Canon A waves of complete heart block. Are there stigmata of superior vena cava obstruction? If you're not sure, you can obviously do, the Pemberton sign, where you ask the patient to raise the arms and keep it elevated for about 30 seconds, and you will see non-pulsatile elevation of the JVP. You will see the patient may develop stridor, okay, and the patient become plethoric, okay. Uh, okay, so moving on to palpation, guys. Apex beat. The apex is normally located in the fifth interspace in the mid-clavicular line, right? But some people say even 1 centimeter medial to the mid-clavicular line in the fifth interspace on the left. Okay, if it's normal, right, in position, remember you can have a situation where it's so-called thrusting, right, which speaks to it being, um, pressure loaded. If it's pressure loaded, we call it a thrusting apex, which usually happens with left ventricular hypertrophy. Where do we get left ventricular hypertrophy, everybody? Aortic stenosis and long-standing hypertension. Remember, the signs of hypertensive heart disease is a loud A2 on the fourth heart sound. This is because of diminished ventricular compliance. Okay, not that ventricle is not very distensible or stretchable. Tapping apex you get in the setting of mitral stenosis. Why? It's a palpable first heart sound. Remember that you have a loud S1 in mitral stenosis, not because of the increased gradient across the mitral valve is very, very narrow. So it's going to flows with a very high sound, with a very loud sound because of the high pressure gradient across the valve. Double thrust is HOCM, hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy. Right. Other things to palpate in the precordium, guys, if there's an LV aneurysm, it may be palpable medial to the apex beat. Right ventricular heave, right. Right ventricular heave speaks to some degree of cor pulmonale, which is abnormal architecture of the right ventricle, usually on account of long-standing pulmonary hypertension. Okay, you get a parasternal heave. You make some call it a parasternal lift. So usually a parasternal lift is in the setting of left atrial enlargement, whereas a parasternal heave is right ventricular enlargement. And how do you determine the difference? The timing of these in the cardiac cycle. Okay. Anyway, thrills as well. So you may feel a thrill in the context of aortic stenosis, and this over the aortic area, which is the second interspace on the right. You may also get a thrill with ventricular septal defect as well. Okay. Now stepping away from palpation and going on to the beloved auscultation. So the variety of things to talk about: venous hum, pericardial friction rub, murmurs, opening snap, clicks, fourth heart sound, clicks, not the skin, clicks. If you live in South Africa, you know what I'm talking about. Fourth heart sound, third and fourth heart sounds, first and second, and then general. So let's start off with general stuff, guys. Just remember that you have a bell. The bell is better for low pitch sounds, and the diaphragm better for high pitch sounds. How do I remember this? Say the word bell, it ends up with hello. So bellow. Bell good for low pitch sounds, diaphragm good for high pitch sounds. Right. The sides obviously at the apex, that's where you listen for the mitral valve. The sternal edge Right sternal edge upper is where you find aortic, usually in the second interspace. A sternal edge on the left upper in the second interspace is where you're going to hear the pulmonary sound, and the lower, usually in the fourth interspace, is the tricuspid, right? Okay, so the normal heart sounds, guys, the first heart sound is basically due to valve closure of the mitral and the tricuspid valves, okay? Um, and when we have a loud S1, we spoke about this in mitral stenosis because of the increased gradient across the valve. The valve is very stenosed and it closes with a very loud sound. Second heart sound S2 it signifies valve closure of the aortic and the pulmonary valves. You may have a single S2 in expiration, and you have a split S2 in inspiration because the pulmonary valve closes after the aortic valve. Alrighty. Sorry, I lost there. I don't know what happened there. Okay, so we said there's normal physiological splitting on inspiration. Third and fourth heart sound, guys. In diastole, you have a very low pitched sound. Ventricular filling is very rapid. That causes the third heart sound. And yeah, so third heart sound, listen, guys, it can be physiological, it can be pathological. If it's under the age of 40, you got a youngster with a third heart sound, that could be physiological, right? In conditions of high output, you can have a third heart sound. Example, thyrotoxicosis. Example, fever. Example, beriberi, anemia, pregnancy, high output states. Pathological in the setting of constrictive pericarditis, ventricular failure, mitral regurgitation, left ventricular hypertrophy, and in an older patient, okay? Third heart sound. Fourth heart sound usually speaks to diminished compliance of the left ventricle and most often is pathological in the setting of pressure-loaded states. Hypertrophic obstructive cardiomyopathy, aortic stenosis, heart failure, and hypertension. Okay? And the elderly, it may be physiological because with age, your ventricle tends to stiffen. Clicks, okay? In systolic clicks, a mid-systolic click speaks to mitral valve prolapse. Early systolic click may speak to, if it's an aortic valve, it could be bicuspid aortic valve, or it can happen in the setting of aortic stenosis as well. Opening snap, when do we get an opening snap, guys? With mitral stenosis and early diastole, right? So remember, with mitral stenosis, you get a loud first heart sound, you get an opening snap, once again, because of the increased pressure across the valve. And what happens is, because of the increased pressure, it opens with such a force that might be tethering off the mitral valve leaflets. And that tethering motion with the valve so-called pulling back is what causes the opening snap. And remember, the murmur of okay, we'll get into that now, right? Oh, okay. Now let's talk about murmurs. So we're going in there. Let's just enlarge it a bit. Uh, Murmurs. There we are. Murmurs. Okay. So innocent murmur, not a guilty murmur, innocent murmur varies with posture and usually is less than grade 3. So you guys know how to grade murmurs, right? And if you get less than grade 3, then it's most likely innocent. It usually mid-systolic and occurs with conditions of increased flow. Okay, like anemia, for instance, right? The timing of the murmur can be either systole or diastole, right? So if it's between S1 and S2, it's systolic. Between S2 and S1, diastolic. Radiation, right? If it radiates, basically, so mitral regurgitation radiates up into the axilla. Aortic stenosis radiates up into the neck. Okay, you must know the different valve areas, so we've already went through that. The character of the murmur, right? If it's a rough ejection murmur, it's most likely a stenotic murmur. The classic one is aortic stenosis. And you have also other stigmata of aortic stenosis, like the pars parvus et tardis, the radiation of the murmur. Okay, and the character, if it's so-called blowing murmur, is most likely a regurgitant murmur. Okay, alrighty. Where are we? Yes, we're talking about murmur. And the other thing to talk about is the pitch of the murmur, whether it's high, medium, or low. The loudness of the murmur, grade 1 to 6. Okay. And how does the loudness vary with changes in posture and changes in respiration? Because you guys know that left-sided heart murmurs are exacerbated on expiration and right-sided heart murmurs are louder on inspiration. Okay. Then other stuff to talk about, guys, if you have a friction rub, a pericardial friction rub, usually happens in the setting of pericarditis. And us in sub-Saharan Africa, the biggest cause of pericarditis would be TB. Okay, tuberculosis. Usually it's a scratching sound, it has a very high pitch, and it's very evanescent. It comes and goes, right? So it varies in terms of its site and its time. A venous hum usually heard at the base of the heart, associated with the raised JVP, and is commonly heard in infants, and when lying flat, it disappears. Okay, so guys, this was cardiovascular examination, and we tried to cover almost all of these in one mind map. So inspection, palpation, auscultation. And the inspection, we spoke a lot about the sternum pulsation, the veins. Palpation, we spoke about the apex and the precordium. Auscultation, there was a lot to mention. General things that we mentioned: first heart sound, second heart sound, sounds 3 and 4. And then we looked at sounds 3 and 4 specifically. Any clicks, any opening snaps, any murmurs, any friction rub, any venous hums. All right, so that was your approach to that. Okay. So, my friends, I hope that you'll just allow me to encourage you with a little bit of scripture. And we, in recent times, we've been considering the humility of Jesus, right? And the keynote text was Philippians chapter 2, verses 5 to 11. So, a good test for ourselves is when you are all alone, where do your thoughts go? Now, if you are thinking high thoughts about yourself, thinking how you are superior to other people based on your education, based on your family line, based on your abilities, based on your good looks, your intellect, then I want to tell you that you have the mind of Lucifer. Because that was exactly how Lucifer thought. He thought he was superior to the other angels. He wanted worship from the other angels. All right? But the mindset of a humble person, Philippians chapter 2, verse 3, Paul admonishes us by saying, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself. Now, it's not to say that you have a low self esteem. You don't think others are better than you, but you consider them as more important than you. That is exactly the attitude with which Jesus washed the disciples' feet. All right, he considered them as more important than himself. So being humble, as C.S. Lewis said, and I quote, being humble doesn't mean thinking less of yourself, but it means thinking of yourself less. And I pray that we will have the spirit of humility as we pursue Christ. Amen. God bless you, and I hope that you enjoyed this mind map. I will see you soon with another high impact video in internal medicine. Much love.